A Paris-bound flight from Rio vanishes after reaching cruising altitude with no explanation. After years of searching, the plane was found in the deep sea. While investigators were puzzled at how such a big jet ends up in the bottom of the ocean, they realized that the cause was less foul play and more simple than previous crashes. How did the plane go missing? Who or what is to blame? I, Detective Hudson, plan to answer these questions and more.
This is the final boarding call for Air France Flight 447 to Paris.
May 31st, 2009. Just after sunset in Rio de Janeiro, Air France Flight 447 had begun boarding for its 13-hour flight to Paris. In command is 58-year-old Captain Marc Dubois. He joined Air France in February 1988 and had nearly 11,000 flying hours. Second in command is 32-year-old First Officer Pierre-Cédric Bonin. He joined Air France in October 2003 and had 2,936 flight hours. Also on board was 37-year-old First Officer David Robert, who was acting as the relief pilot for the flight. He joined Air France in July 1998 and had 6,547 flying hours. Robert had graduated from École Nationale de l'Aviation Civile and transitioned from a pilot to a management job at the airline's operations center. He served as a pilot on this flight to maintain his flying credentials. In total, there were 12 crew members. 11 were French and 1 was Brazilian. On board the flight were 216 passengers. It was a very diverse group. 59 were from South America, 133 from Europe, 3 from North America, 11 from Asia, 4 from the Middle East, 5 from Africa, and 1 from Iceland. Some of the passengers included Isabel, a physics teacher and wife of First Officer Robert; Pablo Dreyfus from Argentina, campaigner for controlling illegal arms and the illegal drugs trade; Isabella Maria Furtado Kessler and Octavio Augusto Sevier Antunes, who were professors at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro; Prince Pedro Luiz of Orleans Braganca, third in succession to the abolished throne of Brazil and grandnephew of Grand Duke Jean of Luxembourg. He was returning home to Luxembourg from a visit to his relatives in Rio de Janeiro. Giambattista Lenzi, member of the Regional Council of Trentino Alto Adige; Fatma Suran Nesipoglu, Turkish classical harpist and academic of Anadolu University in Eskişehir. She was returning home via Paris after performing at the 4th Rio Harp Festival. The last passenger of prominence is Silvio Barbato, composer and former conductor of the symphony orchestras of the Claudio Santoro National Theatre in Brasilia and the Rio de Janeiro Municipal Theatre. He was en route to Kyiv for engagements there. The aircraft operating the flight was a 4-year-old Airbus A330-200. The aircraft underwent a major overhaul on April 16, 2009, and had accumulated about 18,870 flying hours. At 7:29 p.m. Brazilian Standard Time, Flight 447 took off from Rio and was Paris-bound. At 1:35 a.m., as the aircraft flew over the Atlantic, it went silent because it entered a communication dead zone. At that point, after 3 hours of flight time, the last message reported that the aircraft had passed waypoint in tow. The aircraft then carried on the flight, though it didn't arrive to Paris. The passengers did arrive at their final destination. The next day in Paris, Flight 447 was nowhere to be found. In fact, after it left Brazilian airspace, it never connected to any other radar. After hours passed and no word from the aircraft, Air France began to realize something was wrong. Air France then took to the aircraft's communication systems. Air France's A330s are equipped with a communication system, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System or ACARS, which enables them to transmit data messages via VHF or satellite. ACARS can be used by the aircraft's onboard computers to send messages automatically, and Flight 447 transmitted a position report about every 10 minutes. Its final position report at 2:10 a.m. gave the aircraft's coordinates as 2-59 north 30-35 west. Among the ACARS transmissions at 2:10 is one message that indicates a fault in the pitted static system. Bruno Senati, president of Alter, Air France's third biggest pilots union, stated,
"Piloting becomes very difficult, near impossible, without reliable speed data."
The 12 warning messages with the same time code indicate that the autopilot and autothrust system had disengaged, that the traffic collision avoidance system was in fault mode, and that the flight mode went from normal law to alternate law. This raised concerns as to the whereabouts of Flight 447. From there, the search was on. The last reported coordinates were over the Atlantic Ocean. As such, it was assumed that it ended up at the sea floor. While it might seem simple enough, treading the deep sea of the mid-Atlantic is easier said than done. First of all, the depth can reach as much as 30,000 feet. Along with the depth, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere roughly every 33 feet. At the sea floor, the pressure can crush bones and bodies. The second challenge is the visibility. As you go deeper, less sunlight is able to penetrate the depths. At roughly 3,000 feet below the surface is the limit sunlight can reach, resulting in a cold and dark ether. The third challenge is the conditions. The Atlantic Ocean has developed a reputation amongst sailors as vastly rough, chaotic seas along with violent and unpredictable weather. In other words, finding a plane at the sea floor is akin to finding a needle in a constantly moving haystack in the dark. Regardless, the search and rescue teams didn't let that stop them. An aerial search for the missing Airbus commenced from both sides of the Atlantic. Brazilian Air Force aircraft from the archipelago of Fernando de Noronha and French reconnaissance aircraft based in Dakar, Senegal, led the search. They were assisted by a CASA 235 maritime patrol aircraft from Spain and a United States Navy Lockheed Martin P-3 Orion anti-submarine warfare and maritime patrol aircraft. By early afternoon on June 1st, officials with Air France and the French government had already presumed the aircraft had been lost with no survivors. An Air France spokesperson told Elle Express,
"No hope for survivors."
2 French Navy vessels, the frigate Ventos and helicopter carrier Mistral, were en route to the suspected crash site. Other ships sent to the site included the French research vessel Pourquoi Pas, equipped with 2 minisubmarines able to descend to 20,000 feet, since the area of the Atlantic in which the aircraft went down was thought to be as deep as 15,400 feet. French President Nicolas Sarkozy announced almost no chance existed for anyone to have survived. On June 2nd at 3:20 p.m., a Brazilian Air Force Embraer R-99 spotted wreckage and signs of oil, possibly jet fuel, strewn along the 3 nautical mile band, roughly 350 nautical miles northeast of Fernando de Noronha Island, near the St. Peter and St. Paul archipelago. The sighted wreckage included an aircraft seat, an orange buoy, a barrel, and one official claiming
"Pieces and electrical conductors."
Later that day, after meeting with relatives of the Brazilians on the aircraft, Brazilian Defense Minister Nelson Jobim announced that the Air Force believed the wreckage was from Flight 447. Brazilian Vice President José Alencar, the acting president as Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was out of the country at the time, declared 3 days of official mourning. On June 3rd, the first Brazilian Navy ship, the patrol boat Grajo, reached the area in which the first debris was spotted. The Brazilian Navy sent a total of 5 ships to the debris site. The frigate Constituição and the corvette Caboclo were scheduled to reach the area on June 4th, the frigate Bocísio on June 6th, and the replenishment oiler Almirante Gastão Mota on June 7th. Early on June 6th, 5 days after Flight 447 disappeared, 2 male bodies, the first to be recovered from the crashed aircraft, were brought on board the Caboclo, along with a seat, a nylon backpack containing a computer and vaccination card. and a leather briefcase containing a boarding pass for the Air France flight. At this point, on the evidence of the recovered bodies and materials, investigators confirmed the plane had crashed, killing everyone on board. The following day, search crews recovered the Airbus's vertical stabilizer, the first major piece of wreckage to be discovered. Pictures of this part being lifted onto the Constituical became a prominent and disturbing symbol of the loss of the flight. The next 2 years would be filled with mystery and heartache. While the aircraft's point of impact may have been found, the next challenge was trying to retrieve the flight data recorder, commonly referred to as the black box. French Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety Chief Paul-Louis Arslanian said that he was not optimistic about finding them since they might have been under as much as 10,000 feet of water. And the terrain under this portion of the ocean was very rugged. On June 5, 2009, the French nuclear submarine Emeraude was dispatched to the crash zone, arriving in the area on the 10th. Its mission was to assist in the search for the missing flight recorders, or black boxes that might be located at great depth. The submarine would use its sonar to listen for the ultrasonic signal emitted by the black box's pingers, covering 13 square miles per day. The Emeraude was to work with the mini-sub Nautil, which can descend to the ocean floor. The French submarines would be aided by 2 U.S. underwater audio devices capable of picking up signals at a depth of 20,000 feet. Investigators were hoping to find the aircraft's lower aft section, for that was where the recorders were located. Although France had never recovered a flight recorder from such depths, there was precedent for such an operation in 1988. An independent contractor recovered the CVR of South African Airways Flight 295 from a depth of 16,000 feet in a search area of between 80 and 250 square nautical miles. The Air France flight recorders were fitted with water-activated acoustic underwater locator beacons or pingers, which should have remained active for at least 30 days, giving searchers that much time to locate the origin of the signals. France requested 2 towed pinger locator hydrophones from the United States Navy to help find the aircraft. The French nuclear submarine and 2 French contracted ships trawled a search area with a radius of 50 miles centered on the aircraft's last known position. By mid-July, recovery of the black boxes still had not been announced. The finite beacon battery life meant that, as the time since the crash elapsed, the likelihood of location diminished. In late July, the search for the black boxes entered its second phase, with a French research vessel resuming the search using a towed sonar array. The second phase of the search ended on 20th August without finding wreckage within a 40 nautical mile radius of the last position, as reported at 2:10 a.m. The third phase of the search for the recorders lasted from April 2nd until May of 2010 and was conducted by 2 ships, the Ancandies and the Seabed Worker. The Ancandies towed a U.S. Navy sonar array, while the Seabed Worker operated 3 robot submarines OV-BIS. Air France and Airbus jointly funded the third phase of the search. The search covered an area of 2,400 square miles, mostly to the north and northwest of the aircraft's last known position. The search area had been drawn up by oceanographers from France, Russia, Great Britain, and the United States, combining data on the location of floating bodies and wreckage and currents in the mid-Atlantic in the days immediately after the crash. A smaller area to the southwest was also searched, based on a reanalysis of sonar recordings made by Emeraude the previous year. The third phase of the search ended on May 24, 2010 without any success, though the B says that the search nearly covered the whole area drawn up by investigators. In July 2010, the U.S.-based search consultancy Metron, Inc. had been engaged to draw up a probability map of where to focus the search, based on prior probabilities from flight data and local condition reports, combined with the results from the previous searches. The Metron team used what it described as classic Bayesian search methods, an approach that had previously been successful in the search for the submarine USS Scorpion and SS Central America. Phase 4 of the search operation started close to the aircraft's last known position, which was identified by the Metron study as being the most likely resting place of Flight 447. Within a week of resuming of the search operation, on April 3, 2011, a team led by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution operating full ocean depth autonomous underwater vehicles owned by the Wade Institute discovered, by means of side-scan sonar, a large portion of the debris field from Flight AF447. Further debris and bodies, still trapped in the partly intact remains of the aircraft's fuselage, were at a depth of 13,060 feet. The debris was found lying in a relatively flat and silty area of the ocean floor, as opposed to the extremely mountainous topography originally believed to be AF447's final resting place. Other items found were engines, wing parts, and the landing gear. The debris field was described as quite compact, measuring 660 by 1,970 feet, and a short distance north of where pieces of wreckage had been recovered previously, suggesting the aircraft hit the water largely intact. The French Ecology and Transportation Minister Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet stated the bodies and wreckage would be brought to the surface and taken to France for examination and identification. The French government chartered the Isle de Seine to recover the flight recorders from the wreckage. An American Remora 6000 remotely operated vehicle and operations crew from Phoenix International experienced in the recovery of aircraft for the United States Navy were on board the Isle de Seine. Isle de Seine arrived at the crash site on April 26th, and during its first dive, the Remora 6000 found the flight data recorder chassis, although without the crash survivable memory unit. On May 1st, the memory unit was found and lifted on board the Isle de Seine by the rover. The aircraft's cockpit voice recorder was found on May 2, 2011, and was raised and brought on board the Isle de Seine the following day. By 15th May, all the data from both the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder had been downloaded. The data were analyzed over the following weeks, and the findings published in the third interim report at the end of July. The entire download was filmed and recorded. Between May 5th and June 3, 2011, 104 bodies were recovered from the wreckage, bringing the total number of bodies found to 154. 50 bodies had been previously recovered from the sea. The search ended with the remaining 74 bodies still not recovered. The bulk of the challenge was over. The next task was answering the question, what happened to Air France 447? Now that the plane and the black box are present and accounted for, the question must be answered. What led to the demise of Flight 447? Let's go back to just before it went off radar. First Officer Bonin said to Roberts,
The intertropical convergence. Look, we're in it, between Salpu and Tazel, and then look, we're right in it. Yes, let's call them in the back, to let them know.
Roberts said, referring to the cabin crew, which he contacted.
Marilyn, it's Pierre up front. Listen, in 2 minutes, we're going to be getting into an area where things are going to be moving around a little bit more than now. You'll want to take care. Okay, we should sit down then?
The flight attendant replied.
Well, I think that's not a bad idea. Give your friends a heads up. I'll call you back as soon as we're out of it.
Roberts then turned to Bonin.
Let's go for the anti-icing system. It's better than nothing.
Because they're flying through clouds, the pilots turn on the anti-icing system to try to keep ice off the flight surfaces. Ice reduces the plane's lift, weighs it down, and in extreme cases, can cause it to crash, Bonin said.
We seem to be at the end of the cloud layer. It might be okay.
Roberts replied.
You can possibly pull it a little to the left.
Bonin replied, confused.
You can possibly pull it a little to the left? We're agreed that we're in manual, yeah?
An alarm sounds, indicating that the autopilot is disconnecting. The cause is the fact that the plane's pitot tubes, externally mounted sensors that determine airspeed, have iced over, so the pilots will now have to fly the plane by hand. Aside from the loss of airspeed indication, everything is working fine. However, neither Bonin nor Roberts has ever received training in how to deal with an unreliable airspeed indicator at cruise altitude or in flying the airplane by hand under such conditions. Perhaps spooked by everything that has unfolded over the past few minutes, the turbulence, the strange electrical phenomena, his colleagues' failure to route around the potentially dangerous storm, Bonin reacts irrationally. He pulls back on the side stick to put the airplane into a steep climb. Almost as soon as Bonin pulls up into a climb, the plane's computer reacts. A warning chime alerts the cockpit to the fact that they are leaving their programmed altitude. Then the stall warning sounds. Roberts grows concerned.
What's this?
Bonin hastily replies.
There's no good. There's no good speed indication.
Roberts realizes the seriousness of the situation.
We've lost the speeds then.
The plane is soon climbing at a blistering rate of 7,000 feet per minute. While it is gaining altitude, it is losing speed until it is crawling along at only 93 knots, a speed more typical of a small Cessna than an airliner. Robert notices Bonin's error and tries to correct him.
Pay attention to your speed. Pay attention to your speed. Descend. It says we're going up. It says we're going up, so descend. Descend. Okay, I'm descending. Here we go, we're descending. We're in a climb.
Bonin eases the back pressure on the stick, and the plane gains speed as its climb becomes more shallow. It accelerates to 223 knots. The stall warning falls silent. For a moment, the co-pilots are in control of the airplane.
Damn it, where is he? Damn it.
Another of the pitot tubes begins to function once more. The cockpit's avionics are now all functioning normally. The flight crew has all the information that they need to fly safely, and all the systems are fully functional. The problems that occur from this point forward are entirely due to human error.
I'm in toga, huh?
Bonin's statement here offers a crucial window onto his reasoning. TOGA is an acronym for Take Off, Go Around. When a plane is taking off or aborting a landing, going around, it must gain both speed and altitude as efficiently as possible. At this critical phase of flight, pilots are trained to increase engine speed to the TOGA level and raise the nose to a certain pitch angle. Here Bonin is trying to achieve the same effect. He wants to increase speed and climb away from danger. But he is not at sea level. He's in the far thinner air of 37,500 feet. The engines generate less thrust here, and the wings generate less lift. Raising the nose to a certain angle of pitch does not result in the same angle of climb, but far less. Indeed, it can and will result in a descent. The plane now reaches its maximum altitude. With engines at full power, the nose pitched upward at an angle of 18 degrees, it moves horizontally for an instant and then begins to sink back toward the ocean.
Damn it, is he coming or not? We still have the engines. What the hell is happening? I don't understand what's happening.
Robert has no idea that, despite their conversation about descending, Bonin has continued to pull back on the side stick. The men are utterly failing to engage in an important process known as Crew Resource Management, or CRM. They are failing, essentially, to cooperate. It is not clear to either one of them who is responsible for what, and who is doing what. This is a natural result of having two co-pilots flying the plane.
Damn it, I don't have control of the plane. I don't have control of the plane at all.
Roberts then hastily tells Bonin.
Left seat taking control.
Captain Dubois then enters the cockpit, a minute and a half into the crisis.
What the hell are you doing?
Unfortunately, he too seems unaware of the fact that the plane is now stalled and pulls back on the stick as well. Although the plane's nose is pitched up, it is descending at a 40-degree angle. the stall warning continues to sound. At any rate, Bonin soon after takes back the controls. "We've totally lost control of the plane. We don't understand at all. We've tried everything," Robert said. By now the plane has returned to its initial altitude but is falling fast. With its nose pitched 15 degrees up and a forward speed of 100 knots, it is descending at a rate of 10,000 feet per minute at an angle of 41.5 degrees. It will maintain this attitude with little variation all the way to the sea. Though the pitted tubes are now fully functional, the forward airspeed is so low below 60 knots that the angle of attack inputs are no longer accepted as valid, and the stall warning horn temporarily stops. This may give the pilots the impression that their situation is improving, when in fact it signals just the reverse. In spite of the chaos, Captain Dubois makes no attempt to physically take control of the airplane. He instead takes a seat behind the other two pilots. Roberts then asks Dubois, with desperation in his voice,
"What do you think? What do you think? What should we do?"
As the stall warning continues to blare, the three pilots discuss the situation. Ironically, no one mentions the word stall as the plane is buffeted by turbulence. The captain urges Bonin to level the wings, advice that does nothing to address their main problem. The men briefly discuss, incredibly, whether they are in fact climbing or descending, before agreeing that they are indeed descending. As the plane approaches 10,000 feet, Robert tries to take back the controls and pushes forward on the stick, but the plane is in dual input mode, and so the system averages his inputs with those of Bonin, who continues to pull back. The nose remains high. Roberts then says to Bonin,
"Climb, climb, climb, climb."
Bonin replies.
"But I've had the stick back the whole time."
After the co-pilots uttered these phrases, Captain Dubois comes to realize what the problem is.
"No, no, no, don't climb. No, no."
Roberts then responds,
"Descend, then. Give me the controls. Give me the controls."
Bonin yields the controls, and Robert finally puts the nose down. The plane begins to regain speed, but it is still descending at a precipitous angle. As they near 2,000 feet, the aircraft's sensors detect the fast approaching surface and trigger a new alarm. There is no time left to build up speed by pushing the plane's nose forward into a dive. At any rate, without warning his colleagues, Bonin once again takes back the controls and pulls his side stick all the way back.
"Damn it, we're going to crash. This can't be happening."
Robert says.
"But what's happening?"
Bonin says.
10 degrees of pitch."
Dubois says. Exactly 1.4 seconds later, the cockpit goes silent. On July 5, 2012, the BE released its final report on the accident. This confirmed the findings of the preliminary reports and provided additional details and recommendations to improve safety. According to the final report, the crash was the result of temporary inconsistency between the measured speeds, likely as a result of the obstruction of the pitted tubes by ice crystals. Control inputs that destabilized the flight path, failure to follow appropriate procedure for loss of displayed airspeed information and recognize the aircraft had stalled, and consequently did not make inputs that would have made recovering from the stall possible. Safety recommendations issued by BE for pitted probes design recommended they must be fitted with a heating system designed to prevent any malfunctioning due to icing. Appropriate means must be provided to inform the crew of any non-functioning of the heating system. Shortly after the crash, Air France changed the number of the regular Rio de Janeiro-Paris flight from 447 to 445. However, as of December 2023, the number for the route has been changed to 485, and instead of an Airbus A330, the airline uses a Boeing 777. As of January 2024, Air France is beginning to phase out their entire Airbus A330 fleet, to be replaced with newer and more energy-efficient Airbus A350, and they are all to be completely retired by 2030. Following the crash of Air France 447, Other Airbus A330 operators studied their internal flight records to seek patterns. Delta Airlines analyzed the data of Northwest Airlines flights that occurred before the two companies merged and found a dozen incidents in which at least one of an A330's pitot tubes had briefly stopped working when the aircraft was flying through the ITCZ, the same location where Air France 447 crashed. Air France and Airbus have been investigated for manslaughter since 2011, but in 2019, prosecutors recommended dropping the case against Airbus and charging Air France with manslaughter and negligence, concluding, "The airline was aware of technical problems with a key airspeed monitoring instrument on its planes but failed to train pilots to resolve them." The case against Airbus was dropped on 22 July the same year. The case against Air France was dropped in September 2019 when magistrates said there were not enough grounds to prosecute. However, in 2021, a public prosecutor in Paris requested to have Airbus and Air France tried in a court of law. In April, it was announced that both companies would be prosecuted over the crash. Lawyers for Airbus stated they would lodge an immediate appeal against the decision. The trial opened on October 10, 2022, with Airbus and Air France both being charged with involuntary manslaughter. Both companies pleaded not guilty to the charges. On December 7th, prosecutors announced that they would not seek conviction of either company for manslaughter as they were unable to prove them guilty, and recommended acquitting both companies. Families and friends of the victims were outraged by the decision. On April 17, 2023, Airbus and Air France were both acquitted of manslaughter. All in all, Flight 447 was the result of rather simple mistakes. It's silly in a morbid way, but it goes to show just how important communication and proper procedures are in the world of aviation. What are your thoughts on Flight 447? Let us know down in the comments.